Yeah, I totally forgot that.
And so I think that's it. I think it's also a matter of, you want to go out and fail fast. Go out and fail fast. And I think that's, again, tied to that idea of really small scope. Get out there and try things quickly. My current project, I thought it was going to be one of those I could get done in 6 months. And I'm closing in on 10 months.
Going on what you just said, Thomas asked in the chat, he said, can you define scoping for everyone who isn't aware?
Yeah, sorry, I'm not going to be very good at watching chat, so let me know.
Yeah, no, we got you. Go
on. So I was lucky enough the last couple of years not to have to teach very much on Zoom. My Zoom skills are not as good as some teachers. To me, scoping is designing the game. How big is that game? What are the features that are in it? Everybody wants to build an RPG that's got base building and crafting and multiplayer. And each one of those things just makes that scope bigger and bigger. And I couldn't even tell you, I've used the word scope so many times that it just kind of makes sense in my head, but it's planning it. How big is the game? How feature rich is that game? And it's, like I said, I think it's one of the hardest pieces. Learning how to scope your game correctly, I think, is one of the hardest things to do. But once you do that, you dive in and just build games as quickly as you can. I think that's for me, that's the number one tip.
So how do we scope a game correctly? Let's say a game is we want to scope a game that we would finish in about 6 months. Mm-hmm. What would that be?
I was talking with somebody a few weeks ago on this. I'm starting to develop my own kind of measurement of this. So the game that I'm currently working on was a game jam game. I spent 20 hours on it and had a playable prototype. I have now put in 400 or 500 more hours trying to polish that game, just in terms of that's kind of almost my rule of thumb. Thinking about how many hours did it take me to prototype? It's taking me now 40 times longer to polish that game and get it ready to go. I tell my students, dream big and then cut 80% of it out. And then maybe we have a good starting spot. This guy that I was talking to a few weeks ago, my suggestion was you pick your mechanic, pick your singular mechanic and go with that. If you have more than one mechanic, it's going to be too big. Unless you're on a professional team of 5 or 10. I think it is really start really, really small. Pick that element that you think of your game that it makes it special, that makes it different, that you're in love with, and just build the game around that. And do your very best to deny yourself that desire that we all want to add all those other features, and just don't do it. The other piece that I've done with my current project is I really planned it out. It was the first time that I really planned the game out. I took a month of my free time and planned that game out, and that really helped with that feature creep that's adding on. It really helped keep the scope small. It also meant that when I was really tired, I work at a boarding school, and so 12 and 14-hour days are just part of the game. When I'm really tired, it was I had that list. Okay, here's this small thing that I can do. It kept me focused. So I think I rambled a little bit, but hopefully that answered the question.
No, I think that was so basically cut it down by 80%. Try try to have one core mechanic that you're focusing on, and keep your scope or the amount of things that you're working on in the game, or like the total features in the game, as low as possible, so that you can actually, because it'll be 4 times as complicated as you think, or at least.
And I would say too, and this is while I'm finishing up my current project, I'm starting to plan that next one. You need to when you plan that game, think about how much of that game do you not know how to do. And I think a very small percentage, 10, 20% of that game should be things that you don't know how to do. If it gets bigger than that, it's going to get really hard. because you'll think you know how to do something and you won't. There'll be some big bug. Like I put in object pooling into my current project and I've been fighting the bugs. I thought it would be like something I do over the weekend, and it has now been causing bugs and bugs and bugs. So I think really being really careful with not adding too many things to your project that you don't know how to do. And that might be another way of creating or scoping your game, is picking one thing you want to learn how to do and build a game around it.
Absolutely. I just wanted to open the floor to anybody that has any other questions. Go ahead and start typing in the chat and we'll read them out. And or if you want to, you can say them yourself.
Yeah.
Just go ahead and unmute yourself and ask. In the meantime, I'll ask another question. How do you feel about says here tutorial hell, which I'm assuming is I guess just constantly watching tutorials rather than working on the game?
How do I feel about tutorial hell?
Yeah.
Maybe this will sound ironic or weird. For me personally, videos are not a great way to bootstrap and get yourself started. That may be the way that I prefer to learn. Maybe that's maybe ironic, as I have my own YouTube channel. And the reason I think that is difficult is because the videos don't have a common voice and they're not continuous. And so you pick up this little piece here and this little piece here and this little piece here, and it's really hard to put them together. And again, maybe this just makes me old or whatever. For me, getting a book that's 400 or 500 pages and it's the same voice and it's continuous is a way better place to be. It's not quite your question, but in terms of tutorial hell, how to get out of there, I think you get out of there by just by starting and building a game. And again, I think it's a matter of, I think when people get stuck there, it's because they're trying to do too much and they don't want to build a simple game. They're trying to build something fancier. Kind of my take on that. I personally, again, in my own journey, I was definitely stuck there. And my solution to get out was to go buy a book. And for me, that was actually a pretty big transition mentally, right? Because Unity was free, all these tutorials are free. And now I'm like, oh, I'm going to go spend $50 on a book. It felt like a big step. And I actually think that's kind of where it turns into a hobby at that point, right? Instead of just kind of putting your fingers in the pool, so to speak, your toes in the pool, you're starting to spend some money.
Absolutely. Everin asks about scoping. Do you think you can estimate the time to implement features based on their description, or is it just something to get a feeling of over time? So I think he's talking about time estimates.
Yeah, I think it's definitely something you get a better feel for over time. I would assume if you're really getting started, all of your estimates are probably going to be off by 100%. You're going to guess something's going to take you 10 hours. It's going to take you 20, at least. That's my experience. It's a hard thing, but I do think it comes with time. And I think it kind of loops a little bit back to that piece of not planning or having too much in your scope that you don't know how to do. Like right now, I know I can sit down and create an object pooling solution in an hour, half an hour. That's going to be doable. But if I have to create an inventory solution that's like drag and drop, well, now I'm talking about, I might think I can do it in a week, but it's probably more like 2 weeks. I would assume your estimates are always off by at least 50%, if not 100%.
So do you have a big advice on people who are just starting game development now? Do you have any tips for them or something to look out for?
I mean, beyond what I've been the dead horse that I'm beating already in terms of small scope and trying over and over again. I think doing what you guys are doing right now, finding a club, finding people to talk to, getting that feedback, that's huge. I think playing games is big. I'm actually planning right now. I'm going to teach an intensive game design course this winter, and we're going to spend some time playing games and analyzing those games. I think discussing those games, like what makes them good, I think that's really worth some time. What makes them enjoyable, what makes them engaging. And I tend to stay away from AAA games when I'm thinking about that, because for me, that's a whole nother world. I'm actually kind of working on a little bit of a video idea, blog post of like pulling together like successful indie games. What do these really look like? And by that, I mean games that have sold 100,000 copies by a single developer, right? Like these are substantial games. These are games that have done well. We'd all be excited if that was our game. And I think playing those and analyzing those, I think reading or watching videos on game design, I think that's huge. There's the technical pieces, which is where we all, I think a lot of us go to first. How do I program? How do I make my art? How do I make my engine go? But I think learning that art of how to make a game, which still very much learning, I think that's huge and can be neglected.
We have a couple questions from the chat.
Yeah.
What's your most common mistake in designing a game?
The most common mistake, it's either overscoping or underestimating how hard something's going to be. I think up until this current project, another huge mistake I made was feature creep, just letting things get added over time. It's really fun. It's exciting. It's way more fun to add a new feature rather than try to debug or something that you're currently working on. I think just yesterday I solved a bug that I've been working on for a month. It's just been haunting me. It's way more fun to add stuff, and I think that's a big piece. Big piece of it. But underestimating how long something's going to take is huge. Huge. And again, just back to my theme of crank the games out, because you can.
Another question was where to start on your channel, depending on your skill levels. I know you said maybe videos aren't the best way to learn, but I'm sure there's a, where would you recommend, or do you have a playlist maybe? Or
I wouldn't start on my channel, to be honest. I personally, and again, I'm not here to plug anything, and hopefully that was clear by what I just said. Don't start on my channel. The niche I'm interested in filling on YouTube is more of that intermediate slot, going beyond the Brackies channel of like, how do I do this or how do I do that? I'm trying to make things that are interesting to me and that I'm learning from. So I'm not sure my channel is the best place to start. I think Brackies, when you're really starting from zero, is a great place. I was just thinking about this the other day. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. Sebastian Leg. I can give you guys a link. He has I think a 10 or 15 video series on making a very simple game. It's a grid. There's enemies. You control the player and you're shooting. I think that's a great place to start. Yeah, there you go. But I don't, when I was teaching my class, we were using Bolt, or what's now Unity visual scripting. And if you're there, I can give you a playlist on my channel. That was a lot of where my channel started. It's not where my channel is anymore. And I don't have a place for people to jump in.
How do you feel about Bolt scripting? Contentious topic.
Yeah. So when I started, like a lot of us, right? Maybe some of us, I jumped into JavaScript or Unity script when it was first called that, and hit roadblocks. And then I saw these advertisements for create games without code. And at the time, Bolt wasn't a thing; it was Playmaker. And I jumped on that. And I used it in my class, and I actually used Bolt in my classroom for a couple of years. I think it is a great tool to get started, but if you stay in the game very long, you will find the limitations of visual scripting. Bolt has fewer limitations due to its use of reflection. So most of the C# code is in there. Third-party assets can be pulled in relatively easily. But at the end of the day, you're going to hit roadblocks where you can't do something easily with Bolt. So I think it is a fantastic onboarding tool. I think it's a fantastic way to get into Unity in particular. I still feel the sting from Bolt 2 being canceled. Unity chose to cancel Bolt 2, and what they chose to do is create in my opinion, an onboarding tool to get more people using Bolt or more people using Unity, rather than giving a full-fledged programming tool. So I'm saying two things, right? Like, it's a great onboarding tool, and I don't think anybody should be embarrassed or feel like they shouldn't be using it. But I also don't think it's going to be the end of your game development journey.
Great answer. Great answer. So we are coming up on 8. So I think there's enough time for maybe 2 or 3 more questions. We just want to be respectful of your time and everybody else's.
I'm happy to answer questions as long as there's questions.
Okay, I believe Raf had a question to ask.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for coming, Jeremy. Thank you for your
of course.
time. And I have a question. There are new members coming into this club with basically zero or little knowledge about getting started in game development and all. There is this problem that happens to new developers where they get stuck in watching tutorials and that imitation process. So they imitate what they see in a video to try to make their own games. But what happens after you close the YouTube video? Everything is gone and you didn't learn anything. So what would be your advice for these new members to start getting, to get to learn and get the information to stick on their heads and become game developers?
Yeah. I mean, that is the challenge of every single teacher, right? That's the challenge I face every single day when I'm teaching physics or calculus or robotics. I mean, I don't honestly, I don't know that I have a great, easy answer for that. I think it's patience with yourself, patience that it's okay to open that tutorial back up. One of the reasons my background's in physics and not biology is I can't remember anything. I can't memorize anything. I joke with my students in my physics class that all the equations and all the vocab words from the entire year will fit on one piece of paper. And they can't believe me. I think it's perfectly fine to open that back up. I think what needs to happen is you take that video, you can copy it, you can duplicate it, but then you need to have the discipline to take it a little bit further, add some creativity to it and be like, oh, I wonder if I can do this. Can I tinker with this? Right? Like I look up things all the time. Like if I've ever done a live stream of game development, like I plan it out really carefully so that people aren't watching me look at the Unity documentation, or looking up somebody else's video of how to do something because I can't remember it. But I think it's being okay to open that back up and then experimenting with it, trying something new and small. For me, educational philosophy wise, I think the learning happens when you experiment and when you try something on your own. As a teacher, I know very well that sitting and listening to me, you don't necessarily learn very much. So I think, I don't have a short answer, but that would be my suggestion. Hope that helps some.
Oh, that was great. Thank you. Our next question is, do you pay attention to video game industry news? And if so, which publications? Yeah,
I do sometimes. I have less and less recently. And that is just a matter of personal time. My YouTube channel has taken more and more of my energy trying to see if I can make that go anywhere. Also working on this game on the side is taking that time. Gamasutra is probably my favorite by far. I think it covers a really nice spectrum. I think it has a nice mix of information. I'm not actually much of a gamer myself. I don't particularly care what's coming out on Xbox or Steam, but again, game design topics, I love to kind of geek out on that. And I think it's really interesting to read those things. I think it's really interesting to read postmortems of games and what people have learned. I find it really interesting to look at the changing market that is Steam. Steam has changed immensely over the last 4 or 5 years. Not in a way that has helped me. But yeah, that would be what I pay attention to. But I don't have the bandwidth, to be honest, to go much beyond that.
Totally understand. We had another question that was, can you give an example of breaking down a game system? They also provided an example. I'm not sure if you've ever played, you said you weren't a gamer, but maybe you're familiar with Persona 5. They're just asking about how do you break down, if I understand the question correctly, how do you break down a game system and figure out how to recreate it?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a tough one. That's a tough one. I think it takes some practice. I think there's a couple levels there, right? There's certainly the level of what's actually going on with the game system, what's actually happening, what is the player doing. And I think there's also the level of, okay, now how do I create that? That's another level. And I think you first have to, and I think this is what the question's asking, is how do you get to that first part, what's going on? I think it's a matter of studying it. I think one of the things that happens when you start to think this way, the games become less fun. I have found that's maybe overly negative, but I've certainly found over the last 4 or 5, 6 years that I buy a lot more games, but I play them for an hour or two. And again, part of that's bandwidth, my own energy level and time, but it changes. Like that is what I do now. There's very few games that I return to. There's a few games I return to, but there's very few that I return to, and I'll get these games, play them for an hour or two, and look at a mechanic and just think about what makes it fun, what makes it interesting, what makes it different. And I think it's just a matter of sitting down and trying to drill into that idea of what is different about this, what makes it engaging, why am I 20 minutes later still playing this game? It's not because I spent my $10 or $12. It's because there's something interesting here. And I think it's an iterative process. It's there's probably a little bit of self-reflection going on there too, of what am I enjoying about this game? What is this doing for me? What is this making me think? What is this making me feel? Hope that answers a little bit, but that's a challenge. It's a tough one, and I don't have a recipe for it. Other than sitting, playing, thinking about it, waking up in the middle of the night, being like, oh yeah, that's what's going on.
Going off what you just said, can you think of a recent example of maybe a game mechanic or something that you analyzed? Like you said, you woke up at the middle of the night and realized, just sort of figured it out.
Yeah, I haven't been looking at game mechanics quite as much. I've been looking at and thinking more about scope and examples of indie games. For me, and again, this is tangential a little bit to what you're asking. Something that's been really motivating to me is climate issues. I'm pretty pissed off to watch and see what's happening by our politicians and my generation, the older generation. And so I'm really interested in some of those climate mechanics that could be brought into a game. And so, for example, one of the games I think is really clever is Equinox. It's on Steam. It's a low poly game. It's beautiful. It's really simple. And I think a game like that is really interesting to look at and be like, why is this interesting? Actually, I have it in a tab here if you can't find it. And for me, I guess it's not so much as about breaking down the mechanic for me as looking at what makes this game interesting and partially like, why didn't I think of that game? And for me, when I look at that game, what's interesting to me is like when I had my head thinking about an environmental climate themed game, my game was so complex. And I think this is I look at this game and I'm I'm more fascinated by with how do they scope it and keep it interesting, I guess. Again, a little bit of tangential answer to your question.
No, I think that answered it very well. You were looking at sort of the game as a whole and looking at how they use scoping to address, a very important issue with and being able to deliver on it and without being like overly complicated.
And I will fully own and admit that the finer piece of, I think of partial of what's getting asked is, how do you break down a mechanic and make it interesting and fun and feel good? We were talking about game feel a little bit earlier. It's something to be honest, I'll own it. It's something I'm still not very good at yet, right? I'm still very much working on that.
May I ask a more technical question?
Sure.
Some of the biggest issue that people face when developing with Unity is collision. And I feel like there's a big difference in polished games versus unpolished games in terms of effective collision and clipping. If we come across any collision issues in our own projects, what are the steps we can take to mitigate it? Do you have any recommendations?
Yeah, I mean, it's something, I think my suspicion is that most highly polished games, especially if you're getting into that AAA kind of game, they're running very custom physics engines. The Havoc physics engine, from what I understand about it, is fantastic with that. I think Unity now has a deal with them and you can bring in Havoc. It is paid, I believe. Or you're creating your own custom logic. I know, again, speaking from a Unity-centric place, there are ways of dealing with your collisions in terms of maybe changing the rate that the physics engine is going, right? Unity defaults to 50 frames per second. You can increase that. They also have, it's on the rigid bodies. Unity has 3 or 4 settings that you can bump up the accuracy of the collisions. I think, but my guess is that truly polished games are rolling their own physics engine or some of their own collisions to really deal with that. Or they're doing something predictive. Havoc, my understanding of the Havoc physics engine is that it is deterministic. The Unity physics engine is not deterministic because of frame rate. And so this is one of the things that blew my mind when I was making my first game. Not only did I make an RTS multiplayer, I made it physics-based. And trying to sync physics over network was a huge mistake. It blew my mind that Unity's physics engine wasn't deterministic. That if I started the game twice, I would get a different result based on frame rate. So I think it's not I don't think it's a simple thing to deal with. I don't think it's a simple thing to deal with, but there may be just some knobs and buttons that you can turn up the accuracy of your collisions. And that's what I would first start, especially if you're just getting going with game design.
Awesome. A lot of great questions. Really appreciate it. We're just going to ask one last question. I think Leo had one. Just try to summarize it for you. When analyzing other games for inspiration, how can we find what works, what doesn't, and what did the developers intend for us to feel?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Man, these are asking really hard questions. I mean, I think what the developer wanted you to feel, that's hard. And I think sometimes the developer may have wanted you to feel something that's not actually what you felt, and the game's kind of taken on a life of its own. You kind of have this emergent idea, this emergent gameplay, which you can create feelings that weren't planned but have come out of that. In terms of what works, I think that is, there's no shortage. There's a huge value, I should say, in talking to people and interviewing people. What did you enjoy about this, and digging into it? I just recently had a small YouTuber play my project. He did a commentary free video of my game, and it was hugely useful. And so that was more about, okay, how do I make my game better? But I think the same is true of watch people play games, watch their responses. When do they get excited? Ask them what they felt. I think it can be hard to dig into yourself, but it might be easier to dig into what other people are feeling as they play those games. And I think the more you can do that, the better.
So if I'm correct, it seems like you've been kind of alone in this journey of game development. Do you
Yeah.
have any, how do you get testers and gain a community when you're not in a college like this with a club?
Yeah. I mean, I'm here in Colorado. There's a group that meets on Discord, and we get together once a month, or maybe every other month. People bring their demos, they talk about them. It's I would assume somewhat like maybe some of your regular meetings where you're talking about ideas. How does this work? How does that work? You're bringing in a prototype, asking for help on something. There's a lot of resources out there online and to connect with people. And I'm again still very much discovering those things, but I think that's super useful. There's the other sense of building a community for your particular game. That is a whole nother art and science. I actually think that if you're going to be a small developer, building the community around your game, so that people are interested in your game, is actually the hardest thing you have to do.
If I could ask a quick question then.
Yeah, please.
So do you think it's noticeable when people build a game sort of meant for them and their tastes? Like if they're really into one type of game and they're like, we're going to go on it. Do you think that's noticeable or a bad thing? Or
I certainly don't think it's a bad thing. One of the things that I'm trying to verbalize, and I've started writing blog posts before I do videos to put my thoughts down and to create another resource. One of the things that I'm trying to verbalize is how do you create the goal for your game? Is your goal to learn something? Is your goal to make some money? Is your goal to add something to your portfolio? And I think the answer to your question, is it a bad thing, really depends on your goal for the game. What's intended for the game? If this is a game that you are just making and you're going to share it with a few friends and maybe put it up on itch or pay the $100 and put it up on Steam, I don't think it matters at all if it's a game that you just enjoy. And frankly, I think there's probably value in that because you're going to be more excited about it. There may be more creativity in it, and certainly more of who you are. If your goal is to make money, then I think you need to look at what's successful and what gets people excited. One of the big things that I've learned from my current project, or at least this has been my takeaway, is after you're done prototyping the game, you build the mechanics, you make sure it's fun. You then need to make sure the game is marketable. My current game, I think it's an okay game, but it does not work in a thumbnail. And so my goal of trying to sell, I sold 4,000 or 5,000 copies of my first game. I would have loved to sell 10,000 of this game. I'm going to be lucky if I sell 50. And so I think it just really depends on your goals. And again, beating that dead horse, I think you got to make a lot of games. So if your first 4 or 5, 6 games are weird and strange and only you like them, who cares? You're going to learn a ton in that process.
So would you mind talking about some of your projects that you have made, maybe some memorable ones, or the most challenging one, or the most successful one?
Yeah, I mean, my first game was and it is a pile of junk. If anybody wants to play it, I'm happy to pass on some Steam keys to both that and my current project. I don't need to make any money off of it. It was certainly challenging because it was my first game. The code is just spaghetti mess. And if people don't know what I mean by that, it just means all these different systems are interconnected. And if you change one line here, the whole game crashes. It's horrible. So that's certainly challenging. It was challenging then to put that game out there and have everybody break it and spend probably 500 or 1,000 hours then debugging and trying to get that game good so that I felt comfortable taking people's money. A weird dynamic there to start taking people's money. So it's certainly memorable, right? That game was a pile of just total pile of crap, but still very proud to have finished a game, polished a game, put it into early access on Steam, spent a year there getting that feedback, and then finished feeling like I was done. Every bug that was reported was resolved, and I moved on. I then had a couple projects where I just overscoped absolutely horribly. Spent a year working on a game and still didn't have a playable prototype. Those games now sit in a folder somewhere on a hard drive, probably never to be opened up again. I still love those games. I love those ideas. And my current project, I think I said this, came out of a game jam. I think game jams are something that are hugely useful, and they're intimidating, especially if you're getting started. But I think it is no waste of time to spend a weekend or a week building a game. And so this game, I made it. I thought it was fun. It was my first ever 2D game. And a viewer, I think I live streamed a lot of it. A viewer followed me along and then later challenged me basically to turn it into a full-fledged game. Thinking the videos would be popular. They were not. I've spent the last 6 or 9 months polishing that game. And actually I spent about 6 weeks without adding a single feature to that game, simply taking my game jam game and making the code good, making it ready to add features onto it. And I would say, again, I'm going beyond your question a little bit, but one of the things that I am very proud of that game and happy with that game is it's put together so much better than my first game. I can now add a mechanic to that game. So it's this little puzzle game. You can add little mechanics to it. I can now sit down and do the art, create the prefab, write the code, and stick it into the game in an hour. And all the systems just grab that prefab, grab all the data, and stick it into the game. I don't have to add any UI. I don't have to add any of that kind of stuff. And so that's been a neat journey.
Once again, I'd like to thank you so much for your time and your expertise. I'm going to post something in the chat. It's a link to our Discord. Feel free to join us. You can see all the progress we're making.
Awesome.
Great. Yeah. Thank you so much. If we could just get a round of a virtual applause for our guest speaker here.
Do you have any closing thoughts?
Be patient with yourself. Be patient with yourself. There's going to be times I'm a mountain bike racer, which is the dumbest sport. It's almost as dumb as game development in the sense that it's hard, it's painful. You're going to make deals with the devil that you never want to do this again. You're going to fail a ton. You're rarely ever going to win. And I love that. Be patient with yourself, keep working, and ask a lot of questions. I'm on your guys again. I just joined your Discord. I'm happy to answer individual questions if something else comes up. Feel free to message me or ping me, whatever. Happy to answer those questions.
Sorry, before we end it, did you have anything you'd like to plug? Your Discord, your YouTube channel, your
if people want to see that, you can look up my channel, One Wheel Studio, but I don't need to plug anything. I'm happy. I appreciate it. I appreciate the offer, but to be honest, that shit drives me crazy when people do that. So,
well, we won't make you do it. We'll just do it for you.
Anyways, thank you very much, and really sincerely, if there's any other questions I can answer, feel free to ping me. I'm happy to answer those. I think my DMs are turned off on Discord, but let me know, and happy to chat.
Thank you so much.
All righty. Thank you guys. Have a good night.
Thank you, Jeremy. You too.
Yeah.
Thanks for everybody for showing up. Hope you guys had a good evening. Got some good insight. That's good to hear.
All right.
think that went reasonably well.
Yeah.
Eh,
Keep it
yes.
don't keep it there. It was about around an hour or a little less than an hour, so that was good.
Did you schedule it for it to be only 40 minutes?
So free plan only has 45 minutes, but then when it was about to expire, Zoom was like, "Hey, unlimited minutes," and so it was just like, okay, I had planned on stopping it like after like 30 minutes, but now we have extra time, and so it was just sort of like, you know,
Unlimited minutes.
yeah, exactly. It's like, what do I do with all this stuff? So, yeah, I thought, I mean, how do you guys feel about the event? You guys think it went well?
I think it went well, yeah.
Yeah, great.
We should probably stop recording. Unless somebody wants
Oh.
to edit this out.
Oh yeah.
I don't know how the recording